I'd like to welcome everyone, and I want to thank you for joining me. I'm sure others will come as they realize that it's time. I know it's an interruption on a Saturday. But as a fellow homeschooler and a college planning professional, I created this presentation to help other parents like me start to understand what is happening and how it's impacting college admissions, because it's been a little crazy. Life on campus moving forward, as well as the financial side of things. So I've put together an overview, and I'll leave about 10 minutes at the end for your questions. I'm going to ask that you put them in the chat box. Go ahead and do that, as they come up throughout the presentation. I don't have an assistant with me today, so I'm not going to be able to read them while I'm giving the presentation. But at the end, I have a lot of time for question and answer, and I will look at whatever's in the chat box at that point. Because current events are creating ripple effects that are going to impact kids all their lives. We're only starting to unpack that. And from my 16 years of experience as a college planner, 22 years experience as a homeschooler, I can see so many ways for students today to shine, to do something with this unusual time in our lives. And what students do as young as 8th grade, what they choose to do now, will impact their college and their scholarship options. So we'll get into that some more as we go. So I'm going to talk about testing and admissions, changes on campus, as much as we know and what they're kind of looking at. I'm going to talk about the financial side, and then some things that we can do now. And then I'll do, as I said, the Q&A, because I know there are so many issues related to so much of this. And for us, it's even more so the case. So a lot of you found me on Facebook. I'm in a lot of different groups. And so I thought I'd introduce myself. Besides being a homeschooler since 1998 with my 6 kids, I've been a college admissions, financial aid, and scholarship expert since 2004. I've written several books. The 4th edition of Every Catholic's Guide to College will be coming out this summer. The Ultimate Guide to Top Quality College Planning is also a book that I wrote. And these are available on Amazon. I'm a certified college planning specialist, so I haven't just like a mom that decided to do this. I actually had training. And I have a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering from Northwestern, and then a master's in Catholic theology from Franciscan University of Steubenville. I'm a member of a number of different professional organizations, and I always share that because they do have ethical standards. And as we know, there's a lot of shenanigans that have gone on in this field. And I, along with the vast majority of my colleagues, are among the good guys. So I like to let people know that we do actually have organizations we can join and commit to standards publicly. And I do that, and have happily done that my entire time of having this opportunity to work with students. So testing and admissions, it's been a wild ride. We've had, the SAT, the ACT, and various activities, our sports and robotics and the debate and all of our performing arts, everything got canceled all of a sudden a couple months ago. And that has caused huge disruption. Nonetheless, as I checked my alma mater this week, admissions for homeschool students, they still want 3 subject tests as well as the SAT or ACT. And I checked with them by email. They are not at this point planning to change this requirement. They are confident that there are enough test dates between now and the end of the year for students to get everything that they need to get taken care of. University of Dallas, which a lot of my Catholic homeschooling friends love this school. If you go down about 5th or 6th one there, they are still on their official website saying that they are looking for ACT or SAT scores. I believe they also take the CLT, but that's not on their admissions page. It's a little surprising. And they did not respond when I reached out to them to ask if they were changing their policies. So that's making life a little bit interesting. We're going to add to that, we're going to switch to kind of the other side of the table. So what admissions is seeing is a huge hodgepodge. I know, at my house, homeschooling continued with really not much changing at all. But at the high schools, we've got some that have stopped teaching and froze grades in March. Some made everybody go to pass-fail. Some shifted to online teaching, and so they actually continued teaching, yet they still froze the grades, or they gave the students opportunity to improve their grades, but they couldn't get a lesser grade than what they had on March 12th. Some gave the students the option, so individually they're choosing, do I take grades for this spring term or do I do pass-fail? Like I said, some of us continued on with hardly an interruption, mostly homeschoolers, although those of us doing dual enrollment with our kids on college campuses have had kind of the things that continued on, and whatever happened with the college campuses, they shifted to online. And of course, everybody lost all their extracurriculars. So admissions is seeing this huge disparity of what's going on. And then they've always seen that with us homeschoolers, because my homeschool is different than yours, than the neighbors, et cetera. So it's been a little bit interesting for them to sort out. And then our families, some of them, we've got one or both parents working from home, where before we didn't. Now we've got one or both parents unemployed in some households. Some don't have enough computers for everyone. So like at my house, I actually had to buy another computer, even though I work from home. I had my college daughter came home, and I had 4 of us, 3 kids in school and myself, and all with online classes. And then I've always worked virtually. So it's been interesting. Not everybody had the opportunity to buy another computer. That just happened to work out for us. Some of us have had people sick in our households, or we lost somebody. And of course, we're all dealing with fear and uncertainty. So admissions has got to figure out how they're going to deal with this. So some of what they've done is change some policies. So there's a growing number of schools. There has been over the years, but it really exponentially grew in this last month, of schools that are taking test optional policies. So what that means is they're basically creating 2 pools of applicants. They're going to be the applicants that have chosen to apply and submit a test score, and those who are applying without a test score. And for a lot of those schools, this is a new thing, and they're having to figure out, okay, how do we fairly decide who to admit? How do we compare kind of apples and oranges? Because the test scores, being a nationally given test, and so your scores are ranked against others, because there's the raw score and then there's a curve, and so there is a balancing of the scores out, and it gives them extra data. That's part of why they ask for it from homeschoolers. They want to see, how do you stack up compared to your peers in traditional school, to justify our grades, to understand the level of what we're doing, because some of us are, there's such a huge spectrum of what we're doing in homeschooling. And so that's a way that admissions is used, and they still want to use. But then if they're a test optional school, then they're not hopefully going to ask us for scores any more than they're asking anybody else, because we have the same problem. And then we have schools that are deciding that they're not going to take test scores at all. They're done. Some of those are going to ask for graded papers as a work sample. Makes a lot of sense. They want to see a little bit more in depth the academic ability of the student, because that is the primary admissions factor. So there's those big policy changes. And one thing to keep in mind, if your student is applying to test optional schools, or schools that have adopted that policy even for the short run, is that most institutional scholarships, the ones that they give, are based on test scores. So if you apply test optional, then you're not eligible for those scholarships that require a test score to qualify to get. So it's this huge mishmash. And as some of you may have seen this week, the ACT just opened kind of pre-registration for seniors and juniors who had gotten bumped. And then next week in June, they're going to open up registration to everyone for the tests they're hoping to have in August, September, October, November, December. And it's interesting. And they're continuing. It's a weird thing, because they're like, well, it might fill up, but we're going to keep trying to get more test sites as we go. So kids are supposed to keep checking, which is a great way to be super stressed, but it is part of what we're having to deal with. And also the Common App has added, and I'm expecting a lot of the colleges that don't use the Common App are also going to add this, or they're going to have a supplemental information question about COVID-19. And everybody should provide this information. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. There are some things that haven't changed. So deadlines have not changed. Now there's two sets of deadlines. A lot of you may have heard that the decision deadlines, the deposit deadlines to commit to going to a school in the fall, many schools shifted those to June, July, August. Some of them have shifted those all the way to the first day of school, whatever that was on the schedule. And some stuck with May 1. So that we're seeing movement on, but what we're not seeing movement on is the application deadlines. So applications are still opening July 1st and August 1st, and they're due whenever they were due in their usual schedule. Each college has its own schedule. And we've got early action and early decision programs that are continuing with regular decision. So there's different, if you're not familiar, there are different procedures or programs under which to apply at a given school. So a school might just say, all our applications are due December 15th. That's a regular decision school. But some schools will say, well, you can have this program, by this date, this program by that date, et cetera. And there are different implications of the different ones. The essay prompts didn't change with the exception of the addition of the COVID one. And the process, including getting recommendations, is the same. So that is all the same. So a little bit about what our students should do. They need to choose their colleges and majors carefully. This is a time where things are shifting and the colleges are struggling to secure enough students that those with significant accomplishments and who are well prepared are going to be in a position to secure excellent scholarships and seats at excellent programs that well match their interests, learning styles, and enable them to gain an education that will equip them to achieve their dreams while not overly draining the family's resources, which I know the students are concerned about. I'm going to tell you a story in a minute, but I want to go back on what's on the slide here. So they really need to know and have good reasons for why they're going where they're going and what they want to study. Their essays need to be powerful, and that's something that is difficult in the best of times. Right now, it's certainly something I would encourage that they work with somebody like me to help them put that together in the midst of all of whatever the stress is that's going on at your house and your little neighborhood. But coaches bring out the best in us, and they empower us to hone our strengths and mitigate our weaknesses. And they guide and direct our development and help us effectively present our accomplishments to others as we progress. And that is part of what I do. And I also bring another adult voice of sanity and calm as the swirl's going on and the headlines are weird. Like, okay, what we really need to do in your case is this. This doesn't apply, this does apply, so we're going to do this, or you have these options, whatever that is. Okay. And then I wanted to mention Kevin, because one of the things that students are concerned about is, well, all my extracurriculars got canceled, and I was going to go to this thing over the summer, I was going to teach this thing over the summer or do an internship or whatever they had planned, and I can't do that now. So what do I do? How do I replace that? Now both my parents are working from home, and I've got all my younger siblings, and our homeschool year got stretched out because mom can only do so many things. And now that my classes are done, as a high schooler, I had to get my stuff done timely, but we could stretch out the 5th grade, say. So I'm helping run the house. I'm helping with all the meals. I'm helping teach my younger sibling. I'm doing this, I'm doing that I didn't used to do. So they've got heavy responsibilities at home that, in addition to having their extracurriculars canceled, now they have all that. So what do they do with that? Is that okay? Are the colleges going to think they're okay? So I wanted to share a reassuring story. There was a student I worked with a couple of years ago named Kevin, and in his family, he was an only child, and his grandmother lived with them. And his mother was a police officer who had been injured and had a number of issues. So she had medical needs and was home on leave. Grandma was home, and mom had been taking care of grandma when she wasn't working. And so the student then was dealing with taking care of his mother, doing all the meals, taking care of grandma, getting her up, getting her medications every day, and then trying to support dad, who was pulling double shifts as often as he could to compensate for mom's income loss. So this student had no time for extracurriculars. He was racing to school, racing home, running around, taking care of everything and squeezing his homework in. And so I helped him put that in his extracurriculars, because it's significant responsibility when it's completely on you to take care of grandma's medications and make sure she gets to doctor's appointments and all of that. He had all of that responsibility. And so we articulated that to the colleges, and he got into a great college. We applied to the honors college. He got into the honors college with a huge scholarship, which helped really alleviate that financial pressure as well. And he's gone. Unfortunately, his grandmother died, which, as far as the needs of the family for a caregiver, was very helpful, but of course they miss her. So sad. It was a mixed blessing. It's like, yes, we really, really miss her. So sad she's gone. At the same time, this pressure is a little bit relieved. And he's doing very well at the honors college. So there are ways to present this, and admissions will understand that these are legitimate and big responsibilities that these students are taking on. It's no less leadership than being head of some club or something. It's actually significantly more. Okay, and then a word to students about that COVID essay prompt. So this prompt, and there are some notes that they are putting together, which when the Common App cycles at the end of July and opens again August 1st, they should have all those gathered. This is not your personal statement by any stretch. So I recommend there are 3 things to do with this prompt. Answer these 3 sub-questions. What changes have you experienced at schools and in activities? In other words, what could you not do that you would have? Well, I would have kept going to the community college to do this or that, or I would have kept in that sport or that performance or whatever those things were. Those are facts. And then what changes are experienced at home? Well, now both of my parents are working at home, and this and that and the other have happened, and responsibilities have shifted. Home life is different. Again, it's facts. And it's really the trickle down from number 1 of how it's impacted you and your home life. And then number 3 is, what have you done during this time? So for some of our kids, everything got canceled that they had planned. So what did they do? So I've had kids doing all sorts of different things in that time. And I've been coaching them and bringing forth all sorts of ideas and helping them put together different scenarios, projects, programs that are self-directed with that time. So what have they done to fill that time? Now, for some of our kids, that's going to be, as I mentioned earlier, teaching the younger ones and helping to run the household. For some of our kids, they're going to be able to go explore their interests and their prospective careers and majors and schools in a different way. So they want to take a little bit of time there to mention it, not replacing what they've already got on other parts of the application. All right, let's take a look at what's going on in life on campus. Now, these pictures are not from last week, but they could be, because that's kind of what our campuses are looking like. But it wasn't that long ago that they were more like this. But I wanted to touch base on this piece especially. What's going on in the minds of administrators who are coming off of a semester that was interrupted and looking forward to a semester that may very well not happen. It definitely isn't going to happen as they had normally planned. So there's a few things that have already been stated that people are going to do. So Cambridge came out and said they're going to do what typically is called a hybrid or flipped classroom. And I actually have a little diagram here because it's confusing terminology for a lot of people. But what it means is that they're going to do the reading and the lecture by themselves. So the lectures will be delivered on computer, but then there's small group tutorials, which was the bread and butter of going to school there anyway. Those are going to be still done in person in small groups. So that's what a flipped classroom is. So instead of having the lecture with everybody there and going home to work on your own, you're going to have the lecture on your own and do the reading on your own, and then come in with your questions and discussions and activities together as a group. Then we've got the Cal State system that they have already said they're going to do everything online, just about. There'll be some of their labs and things they said they're going to do in person. My guess is that's going to be upper division things as opposed to the lower division, but we'll see how they do that. They're going to figure that out. It's 23 colleges. They'll figure it out and tell us. Some schools are looking at staggered schedules. So they're thinking of breaking their school year up into 3 semesters and cycling the kids so they have fewer students on campus each time, or block schedules where they're dividing the semester and they'll do intensive shorter classes And that way they have more agility to move a term because the terms are shorter. And if there's interruption happens, some are talking about shifting terms. So they're going to start earlier and end by Thanksgiving. So there is no Thanksgiving break in the middle, while having the kids disperse everywhere and then come back with whatever they come back with to finish up for finals. And then many more. There's some schools talking about having 15 different options that they are exploring. Okay. I also want to address this from a couple other perspectives. So I pulled this clip out of an article this week. I was absolutely stunned. So some of the things that college presidents are actually saying this week, in late May 2020, from Purdue: feel uncomfortable, don't come. You're not for us, at least not this fall. It sounds a little bit freaked out because it's such a bizarre thing for a college president to say. Arizona State told students to think like a surfer. You're going to find yourself in deep water. You need to find a way out. Don't let people tell you what your fate's going to be. Kids need to take charge because things are changing and they need to go with the flow and find a way through to get to their objective. That's actually pretty decent advice. And then the University of Washington told students that this is not the moment to cut short your education. Colleges are desperately afraid that they're not going to have enough students. They are predicting 20% melt, which is a term I'm sure you've never heard of. So the end, May 1st, June 1st, they get these deposits and say they get 5,000 kids who have deposited. It's like, great. Typically, they don't have 5,000 students show up in August. So typically they lose 5%. It depends by school. There's some variation. This year, everyone across the board is afraid that they're going to lose 20%, which is devastating to lose that many students and have that many kids just drop out of getting an education. Now we know that a large portion of our kids who go off to college don't finish. So I think there might be a silver lining in that. We have some kids that figure out earlier that college isn't where they should be and the best way for them to move forward in their lives. And they don't end up with part of a college education and a bunch of debt. That would be a good outcome. But for the colleges, it's a problem because obviously there are businesses and they're counting on so many students to pay the bills. So there's a lot going on. But then we also have this piece. They've shifted how they're marketing. And I'm sure you have all seen, because unless you are living under a rock, and none of us are because you're all on Facebook, that they are saying, we will definitely be on campus this fall. That is 100% marketing. They are trying to get the kids who haven't deposited yet to deposit and the kids who have deposited to come. CSU, even though they said they're going to go online, they said it May 2nd. They got the kids to deposit first before they said, okay, and by the way, we're going to do this online. Because they're all desperately trying to get enough students to have class, to be able to do two things. It's their mission. That's what they're there for, is to educate people. So they want to gather the students to educate them. But then they are also needing to balance the books at the end of the day and have enough dollars coming in so they can stay afloat. And we're going to talk about a number of things on that end of it. They're also doing some marketing things. Like American Public is going to discount tuition by 50% for up to 2 classes. Robert Morris, you can enroll in a free online course this summer. Franciscan University of Steubenville, many of you may have heard, they're covering tuition for new students and new transfer students this fall. Anything above scholarships, they're going to cover the tuition. It's kind, and it's been portrayed as kind, but it's also marketing to get enough students to stay in business. It's changing how they're recruiting students, and the fact that they are businesses is showing much more in the way that they are all handling all of this. So let's take a little bit, a moment to look at the financial side of things. So all the colleges are struggling financially, period. Johns Hopkins has put their numbers out, and it's like 100 or 200 million they're planning to lose this fiscal year. It's like 670 million they're expecting they're going to lose next fiscal year. And Northwestern has put out things. Arizona State has got things out in their public relations or human resources. All these schools are losing revenue through tuition, through research. Their endowments, obviously, a lot of it was invested. They've lost values. They've lost value with that. They have extra costs of shifting to online and getting extra training for their professors and having to buy software and all sorts of things to shift all of this. And then now they're marketing differently. That's been a bloodbath financially. They're just losing it like crazy. We've had a couple colleges close already. Others will absolutely going to happen. Some colleges are merging. That's going to continue to happen. And over the next decade, this is going to happen a lot. After 2025, we have a huge drop off in population, like to the tune of 800,000 students over the next few years after that. So our sixth graders are going to see this shift. All this is changing. So COVID is just jump-starting it as far as the colleges closing. And Forbes and others have done financial strength ratings of various schools. They don't do all the schools, but there's a whole bunch of schools that are in trouble. And we've known that. There's been information buried deep in the bowels of the data that's gathered by the federal government. We've been aware of it for a while and watching it. And it's hard because the ranges are broad. So a school that's got an F grade, how in danger are they? Some of them are on the brink of ending. Some, they're struggling, but they're not on the brink of ending. But this is really testing everybody because everybody has lost a lot of money. So that's an issue that's going on. They've taken action. They're furloughing staff. They're laying people off. They're talking about laying more people off. They're taking pay cuts. They've stopped projects, any kind of building or expansion projects, done. They're taking deep budget cuts across the board. And this summer, something none of us ever think about is when they set the scholarship budgets for the next round. So this summer, they'll be setting the scholarship budgets they're going to use for our juniors who are going to be applying. What kind of shifts are they going to take? Because they have to balance that, because scholarships are coupons. So can I get this $20,000 things for $18,000 or $15,000? It's a coupon, because I feel like I got a better deal, even if they inflated the price to 20. I mean, like some schools literally have gone to visit, and before I've been in admissions office for 5 minutes, they've said, oh yeah, everybody who comes here gets a $10,000 scholarship. I'm like, oh, in my head, I'm like, you have an inflated price so you can keep up with the Joneses, look competitive with the other schools like you, but your price really isn't 35, it's 25. Got it. But psychologically, we all feel better going, wow, their price is 35. We're going to get it for 25. And if Johnny does really well on the tests or whatever, we could get it for even less. So we're thinking we're getting a deal. So there's this whole psychological game that's going on. We've got colleges that are selling property. We've got colleges having fundraisers. I have seen a lot for Christendom College and a few others. They're just trying to raise money. University of Dallas was raising money, not for their own expenses, but to help the students that kind of got stuck there. They're internationals and others, which I really appreciated that they were doing kind of a very fundraising, but it's not for the university. It's so that we can help these other students. And then they are doing everything they can to secure the students. It's very interesting. And we got all sorts of strategies going on, as I've been alluding to. And it came out this week that the University of Kentucky announced it's not going to lay off any staff. And in the Inside Higher Ed magazine, it's one of those newspapers, I guess, for professionals in this field. They're doubting that many universities are going to be able to say that. University of Kentucky is going to be pretty alone in not laying people off. So it's pretty intense. So the other thing that's going on is we've got families who have been adversely impacted financially, and they're appealing their financial aid office. The financial aid offices, like everybody else, are working remotely. They have a limited pool of money because it was budgeted last year, and they're doing their best. There are a lot of requests, and they're trying to stretch the dollars. So as, Jane, who was offered a $10,000 scholarship, the date goes by, she didn't deposit, that $10,000 gets freed up and put back in the pool that, okay, now we've got these 3 families that are struggling because somebody's out of work or something. So they're doing the best they can to stretch all of those dollars. The federal government has also chimed in. It's not something any of us really wants is loans, but they have significantly lowered the interest rates. So the undergrad student Stafford loan, the interest rate for loans taken after July 1st, so for next school year, are 2.75%. The Parent Plus loan, that interest rate is down to 5.3%. The graduate school loans are also lower. So to put that in perspective, compared to last year, borrowers are going to save $1,000 in interest per $10,000 borrowed in a 10-year repayment term. That's a huge drop because it was 4 point something for the undergraduate one last year. So it's a huge drop. It's going to mean a real difference in what people have to pay back. It's still a loan, but there are lots of contributors here trying to make this all work. Okay, so let's look at some of the implications because there's a lot of different factors that we've talked about and admissions. So this is a slide from my usual presentation that 90% of scholarship monies come from the colleges and universities themselves. Private scholarships do directly impact need-based aid. Most of these are based on test scores, so we need to have test scores to tap into this. But how much of that's going to change? We really don't know because there's this balance of they only have so many dollars and that's all being budgeted very tightly, but they use these dollars to attract students. So there's going to be some really difficult conversations happening this summer. How all of that's going to be impacted, we don't know yet. As I mentioned before, some are expecting 20% of the students planning to go to school in the fall to drop this summer. It has been widely talked about that students are going to ask, many students are going to ask for a deferral so they can take a gap year. But at this point, there's no increase in the number of requests for those in admissions. So we don't know because that could happen in July or August. At the same time, just because you have been accepted at ABC University and you've deposited there, and then you come back later and say, I'd really like to take a gap year because of whatever reason, that's a request. And some schools have policies that they're already talking about not changing if they give very few. Some schools have policies of being very flexible, but how many can they do? And then will there be a domino effect on admissions for the next year and financial aid for the next year? There may well be. So it's going to be something to watch. It's going to be, right now, nothing's changed, but very well might. Wait lists. So if you're not familiar, when you apply to a school, most of us think you get accepted or denied, but sometimes you're kind of in this gray zone and you get put on a wait list. It's like, well, you're in the range of getting accepted, but we didn't accept you. We have too many, whatever, we're accepting 10 and you're number 12. And so we put you on the wait list and you can accept your place on the wait list or not. Most of the time, the wait list is for the college. They've got a pool of already approved candidates. They can just say, okay, so do you want in? All right, you're in, and go and tap the wait list to fill in an empty spot if maybe they had too many kids that got accepted, say no. And they were still trying to get, they accepted 100, they're looking for 75 and they only got 73. So they'll go to the wait list to try and get those last two. They have been super active before May 1st even. People were getting off the wait list. And even at places like Stanford that rarely ever goes to its wait list. As I've been talking every week, I've had 3, 4, or 5 meetings with various admissions professionals from various colleges and universities. Many are expecting that everybody on the wait list is going to get accepted between now and the end of the school year or end of the summer. That never happens. That never ever happens. So is that going to be a thing next year? Well, admissions is already talking about, a number of schools is talking about accepting maybe 10% more students next year to ensure securing a class. So instead, they're looking for that 75. Instead of accepting 100, they're going to accept 110. And they might have a wait list as well because they're going to make, as sure as they can, they get their 75. Every strategy they can put at getting in their cohort of students, they're doing. But that has some implications for us. Let's see. Again, looking at give us an insight into the other side of the table. So the admissions professionals, their deadlines haven't shifted mostly. Like I said, some of the intake of students have shifted, but the application round has not changed. Usually admissions people start traveling, especially in the fall, but some in the summer. They're having college fairs and things and meeting people in high schools, and they can't do that. College fairs are virtual now. High school counselors are at home. So they've lost a major avenue to talk to students and to draw them to their universities and colleges. They are reaching out to college consultants and having lots of meetings with us to help hope that we spread the word about their particular college, which is part of what we do. I am very student focused, and I want to find colleges that are good for each of my students, as opposed to I'm, busy. Hey, everybody go to this school. No, and that's against the ethics anyway of my profession. But so they're scrambling to reach out in any way they can. Some have changed testing requirements. As I said, they might do this for homeschoolers. I think if you are in a situation with a junior and you haven't been able to get testing, and you've tried this week and you're really having difficulties getting your testing scheduled even, and who knows if those scheduled dates are going to happen, whether you've taken the CLT or not, because it happened in April, they're going to do a remote testing again in June. I would call your students' top schools, or not call, email, because nobody's answering the phone, and say, we're homeschoolers and we're, are you going to change your policy? How can we demonstrate our academic proficiency? Ideally have the students send that email with a lot of help from mom or dad or somebody like me to petition that, hey, there's this group, you haven't really talked about changing the rules for us yet. We need some relief in here as well. And then they are also now starting to revamp their application evaluation processes, especially if they're going test optional. Either if they're going entirely test optional or test blind, so they're not going to look at any, or they've got optional and going to have these two pools with scores and without scores. They got to figure out how to do that. So they're scrambling, trying to figure out all that. So that's where their heads are at. So let's look at what we can do about all this, because I had a graduating senior this year. I have a freshman coming up the pipeline. So I'm getting hit by this personally just as much as everybody else is. So for students, number one, keep calm. Nothing to stress about. It's going to be okay. Not quite sure what that's going to look like, but it's going to be okay. Get to know yourself well. That may sound funny, but the personal statements are all about reflection. What really makes you tick? What's really going on inside of you? Who you really are. So taking some time to reflect on some things and changes, and the whys. Why do you want to do this? Why have you responded in that way? Kind of who are you? Who do you want to be? Identify and pursue your interests. Even though the usual avenues are not there, there are still many avenues. And I've been helping my clients' families find avenues for their kids to explore and pursue and do different things, even from home, even when they can't get out at all. Because depending on where they are geographically, some people are really not able to get out, or their family situation, if they've got somebody that's a vulnerable person in their household. You want to clearly define your college goals, and that's going to benefit you in a number of ways. And it doesn't matter if you're an 8th grader or if you're an 11th grader. Why do you want to go to college? What's the purpose? What are your goals for going to school? What are you looking for to gain by going to school? How is it going to improve your life? How is it going to improve you as a person? Those become your goals. And deeply research prospective schools. Now, this is a step that in the best of days, most kids don't do very well, and families struggle with, and it's something I help with families with quite a bit. But there's a lot of information out there. There are virtual tours. There's information on the websites. There's information in the departments and the concentrations and the minors and the majors and the programs that you are interested in. Have you read that? How does this school stack up against that school? Now that school is starting to mention those things sound really interesting. Does that school have it? I don't know. They don't talk about it. Well, Professor so-and-so's got an email somewhere. Find out. They're sitting at home too. They love teaching. That's why they're doing what they're doing. So don't be afraid to reach out and ask questions. Follow your curiosity. Take tests when you can. So we've got a rolling situation going on, which means you need to be ready to test as soon as the tests are available. If you're interested in scholarship dollars, you need to find a way to take the ACT or SAT. You need to know that they are both working on shifting to online and taking a test, especially reading comprehension, but also the math side. But reading comprehension, because I took the GREs a few years ago before I got into my doctoral program. And so you're reading a passage on your monitor and you have to answer these complex questions about it. That's require some different strategies than when you have the passage on paper and you can mark it up. So there are a number of ways that you can learn how to do that. And that'll be helpful because in the real world, whatever the real world is, sometimes for our high school classes, they're online and the kids are reading passages online. Sometimes the passages are in a book. Sometimes it's so long you can only print out part of it. You need to be able to function no matter how things are presented to you. Yes, we know neurologically some are better than others, but it is what it is. So how do we learn to do that? So taking the time now to figure that out and find the strategies that work for you. It's going to be important. And then seek ways to serve. Even if all you can do is sneak out at like 6 a.m. because there's no pedestrians then, and you're drawing smiley faces and flowers with sidewalk chalk in front of your house for the people that are out walking their dogs, the people that aren't frail that are getting out. There are things you can do. How can you serve in your home, in your family, in your community? What can you do? There are things going on. So find ways to do that. And that will help with fighting the depression that we're all under too. Because when we start focusing on others, it lifts everything in our psyche. Okay. And then for parents, again, keep calm. And remember that the headlines exist only to grab your attention. So don't believe them, basically, because they're never all the way true. There's always the fine print. Like the president saying, we will definitely be open this fall. Our campus will have students in the dormitories. And the unspoken or the fine print below that is, if the health officials and the legislatures allow us to have campus be open. So that headline and the reality are different. So stay calm. There's going to be a way through. It's weird. Again, it's weird. Work with a college consultant who can mentor you and your child, help you get aid and scholarships in the middle of this. Remember, whenever there is change, there are also opportunities. So I am spending a huge amount of time these days staying in touch with what's going on in this upheaval. Okay. Help your child adapt to the odd schedule this year's application season will impose. Now, this is really for those of you who've been through this cycle before. You've got some basic idea of how the application cycle flows. But normally the testing's already done and we can move on into different phases of it. And we have a flipped schedule. So there are things we need to do in different order than we've done them before. Your child isn't adapting, you are, because your child hasn't done this before. So just be aware that we're going to need to approach it differently this year. And then help your child come to know him or herself well, their strengths, their weaknesses, their learning style. As adults, we have language around things. I've got a son that's Asperger's and some of his social skills are not strong. And he takes things really, really literally. So if I say pick up that piece of paper, the one next to it doesn't get picked up. So helping him recognize that and have language around it. So as he's looking at schools, what schools have supports or what kind of supports do you need? Do those schools have it? That information is available as well. Or just, I'm an experiential learner. How do I do this long distance? There's schools that specialize in that. How are they adapting? How are they making this happen? Because it's happening. It's different. It's maybe not ideal, but knowing that that's a need for them to thrive, that's an environment, helping them know that. It's a lot of times us informing them of this is kind of how the world talks about that. This is the language you need to look for, or the kind of professional you need to talk to on campus to find out what the opportunities are for support for somebody like you. They've seen everything. And remember that this current academic upheaval means that for the next several years, there's going to be a deficit of students applying to college because a lot of them are going to opt out or they're going to drop out. And then the colleges are going to accept students they wouldn't have in previous years. So that means that our kids have better chances at getting bigger scholarships and landing a position at a more prestigious college than they did before the pandemic. And prestigious can mean whatever you want. As we know, there are different criteria. And just because they're US News and World Report #1 on something doesn't mean that that's the best learning environment for my child with his or her strengths or weaknesses and interests, et cetera. And then we're going to bring in the whole moral aspect of that. Yeah, that's a whole nother thing. So, okay. But you're going to create your prestigious college list based on your criteria. So I wanted to share that I do have college planning services from $99 a month, that there are a number of plans to meet different families' needs. I also provide essay coaching, funding coaching, financial aid form preparation services, and I have a discounted online test prep courses from ePrep. And I strongly recommend, especially right now, working with a college advisor or consultant in order to take advantage of the opportunities we have right now. As early as 8th grade, I can start to plan out academic careers to reflect their talents and interests, prepare for their ideal post-high school program, whether it's welding or graduate school. With colleges starting to close and merge, it's going to be harder than ever. It is harder than ever before to navigate the college landscape. Keeping on top of these changes is a full-time job. A college advisor can help with that. Now, as a Catholic homeschooler, my primary focus is on helping students become people of high moral character, develop their particular gifts and talents, and define their dreams. It's my job and my privilege to guide them to the steps they can take to make those dreams into a reality. That is what I have been doing for the past 16 years. In this current climate, with colleges working harder than ever to attract students, my skills are even more valuable and important than they have been. The potential to win both scholarships and to get into the dream college is higher now than it ever has been. At the same time, we got to make sure your college is still going to be open in 4 years when they graduate. So trying to bring all of that data as it's available in flux to bear on your situation. Wanted to share a note just because, especially for us homeschoolers, we are very much into do it ourselves. And Valerie I worked with her and her 2 kids just a couple of years ago. And she figured, I'm a professional project manager. I can do it myself. For over a year now, I've had a second job. I will admit at this point that I was penny wise and pound foolish in not engaging Katherine to do more of this for our family. If you decide to take on the college research and admissions process yourself, and this was before COVID, you need to be unfailingly organized, ready to nag your kids regularly, and ready to spend hours and hours and hours of your free time over months. It's no fun to do this yourself. So if you could find the money, save yourself the grief. If I knew then what I know now, I would happily have signed on the dotted line. And since then, I've actually made my prices moved to the Midwest and made my prices more affordable because I want to help a lot of families. So I'm going to invite you to put your questions in the chat box. So I'll be getting to those next. I'm also going to invite you to schedule a consultation so we can create a college success plan for your student, your family. It'll be common sense, results driven, and action plan for your college bound teen. So at the bottom of that blue box, you'll see the website where I do that scheduling, and there is a small fee for that. Then I also have a gift for you. I want to thank you for your time in this Saturday learning about all of this. And so I created an ebook called 15 Ways to Save $10,000 on College. There's actually 16 ways, and many of them can be used to save more than $10,000. And even with COVID, nearly all of them are things you can implement. So if you go to my website, CelticCollegeConsultants.com, and then add /free-book, there'll be a form for you to fill out so I know where to send that PDF file of that ebook. And then my last 6 classes have averaged over $240,000 each in merit scholarships. So it's time for Q&A. I will take a look at the chat, and then I will put that information up because I know that's a lot of websites to look at. So helping our kids figure out what they want to do can be a challenge. And we have to kind of step out and give them some space. Sometimes as parents, we think, ooh, they said they want to do whatever, and we can really see them doing that. And so we can get a little bit fixated on that idea. Oh, here's Johnny, he's going to be a lawyer or whatever it is. And sometimes they change their mind, or sometimes they want to explore things and they're not really ready to say it out loud because they're not sure how committed they want to be. They're just curious about it. So having that space of working with a third party works really well to give them freedom to explore those things. And one of the problems with getting out of college in 4 years, because I'm not sure if you're aware that the average is 6 years to get a bachelor's degree, is not knowing what they want to do. And so we've got kids on average changing majors twice, which typically is adding a year each time they do that. So as much as we can do that based on their personality, which is pretty fixed, their general strengths, you don't get suddenly good at math in college if you were bad at math in middle school or high school. We can help them know how to evaluate things and then go to college with, I'm looking in this area. I'm thinking it's going to be accounting, but it could be, financial management or this kind of range here. And we've done that evaluation and found schools that offer that set of related interests. And they're aware of, well, I've got this set of classes I need to take before I can get too deep. And I can take an intro to this and an intro to that and kind of balance these two concentrations in my major or these two adjacent majors, or do an interdisciplinary of these two very different fields. And we've found schools that are really good at doing that and bringing those conversations and getting those kids out in 4 with the two really different majors. So if they have all of that going on in high school, they're much more likely to get done in 4 also. So that helps. The return on investment is huge. One of the things that's a little bit challenging is if the kids haven't done a lot of pre-work as far as figuring out what they want to do, most of them are not working in their field. So like going to look at salary.com or something, like what is the typical salary in this field, is difficult because they don't tend to stay in it. If you're thinking, a lot of people that ask me that question are thinking of a liberal arts education for their kids. And they are concerned that, are they going to be able to get a job? Because who wants a liberal arts major? When in fact, everybody wants a liberal arts major because liberal arts majors can think and can articulate themselves very effectively in various different platforms. They know how to argue, which means that this position is better for our company and here's all the reasons why, and they can make that presentation very strongly. They know how to resolve conflict because they've had all those difficult conversations where, well, I think, Socrates was right. No, I think Aristotle was right, or et cetera, et cetera. And they've figured out how to have a deep, detailed conversation and discuss the merits of a position. And they do well in all sorts of fields. And they're very trainable because they're very used to thinking and reading and learning new things, as opposed to some of our traditional majors at some schools. Well, even Northwestern, when I was there, I wasn't taught to think. I was taught a lot of math, but I knew how to do a few things, but I couldn't critically analyze a lot of things. And it was interesting because my major was actually industrial engineering and management science. So I did take some classes with the Kellogg School of Management MBA students. And our ability to function as managers in an engineering field was really limited because we had bits and pieces. We didn't have this overview, which a lot of those liberal arts kids do. So, you're very welcome. And glad that you were able to be with us. Interior design, yes. And there are a lot of approaches. She can also make a ton of money doing that. So there would be a lot of considerations in particular with interior design, because it's a field that has a lot of flexibility. So as she has a family someday, there'd be space for that. And there's different ways to do that. Are you a high end and working with, I guess what I'm trying to say is there are certain parts of interior design where people make quite a bit of money. And there's others where they're not making very much. It's kind of a side. I've seen everything from like the YouTube based side hustle interior design all the way up to the significant 6 figures working in exclusive homes. So there's a lot of different things that could be done with it. And these days, even with lockdown, I'm seeing interior designers effectively design and redesign spaces without leaving their houses. There's so many tools available. And Baylor's an expensive school. They have some scholarships, but it's not the only school for interior design as well. So we might be able to find what you need at a lower price point when you get done with all of that. and or some strategies in high school to shorten the length of college by bringing in a bunch of credits in various ways. So there's a number of things that we can do. Hopefully we'll have the opportunity to talk one-on-one and we can discuss that further. These are really good questions. Let's see. We're not seeing changes on the FAFSA deadlines or the profile deadlines or the individual schools that have their own financial aid form deadlines. And I don't expect we will. I'm expecting, however, that the financial aid awards may come later next cycle than they did this year. Usually they come anywhere from December to March. We'll see as things shake out next year that those considerations may come later, which makes life a little bit more interesting, which is keeping calm. And, the more developed and focused and poised I am and more aware of opportunities and what I'm looking for, the more I see that. I mean, I think we've all done that exercise where somebody says, kind of look around the room, memorize everything, close your eyes. Okay, write a list of everything that was green in the room. And you come up with some stuff. Whereas if you were having your eyes open, okay, memorize all the green things, then they usually ask us to write down the blue stuff, but that's just because they're playing a game with us. But in real life, if we're looking for the green opportunities and we're going to start to notice them where we might have not noticed them before. And that's something that I get the privilege of doing is when I am out kind of in the world of higher ed, which I spend most of my life there, I have all these kids in my head. And so I've got somebody looking at interior design and somebody looking at architecture and somebody looking at musical theater and somebody looking at this. And as I'm hearing from these schools about different opportunities that they have and programs that they have, and I've got these kids in my head, and this one needs this kind of a learning style, and this one wants a Catholic campus, and this one wants this, and so they have another set of ears out there all the time looking as well. Because between homeschooling my own 6 and finding things for their needs, and then all my clients, I am knee deep in colleges all the time. It's what I do. As opposed to some of my colleagues are really good at like the top schools in their area, and or the top schools at the high school that they like to work with, those kids go to, where I'm so student focused that I really want to see, I'm looking for your daughter, your son, my son, what is the right situation for this child? And I've got my radar up all the time. So if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I've got a few more minutes. Yes, Katina, I'm sad to say you may well need to research all over again. Especially, I would pay attention to the learning styles that are adopted on the campuses that he's looking at, because that some of them are more suited to certain kinds of students than others. And so you're in that place where you are going to get to see how they try to do things and what they've set up. And they're spending an enormous amount of energy researching and exploring and playing with ideas this summer. And some schools are really open and flexible and some schools are not. And, as he finds that, of the 8 schools I was looking at, these 5 are really being dynamic in ways that I could learn in that. And these 3 are not doing so much. That tells you a lot about your school list. And maybe you want to replace those 3, or maybe you don't, or maybe all 8 are wonderful or all 8 are clunkers. But yeah, that's part of why I brought that up in this presentation, so that parents would be aware. We need to pay attention to how that's going to work. But yes, it's going to mean more research. And it's going to mean more November 1st applications as opposed to August 1st applications for the early, just because we want to see what unfolds. Even if my application was ready August 1st, I don't know that I'd submit it unless I was okay with spending the $70 or whatever and maybe throwing that school out before we're even accepted or denied. But most of us, I don't know, I like to have more clarity about what it is I'm ordering off the menu before I say that's what I want. So sad to say there'll be more research. At the same time, have your son do that. That'll be a really good exercise for him. So glad you were able to be here, Jamie. Oh, wow. Yes, and I hope that you'll meet with me. I can share with you, I've given a number of presentations to homeschoolers, kind of like the overarching, over the 4 years of high school, what the colleges are looking for, so some tips on how to set up what you want to do in your homeschool through the high school years. And I'm glad that I was able to help. So thank you all so much for coming and for sticking with me for the entire hour. I hope to hear from you all soon, and I will be in touch with you next week just to follow up.